Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Rising. I'm being told we have the best Thursday show you've ever seen. So, Briahna, can we live up to the hype?
Of course. It's our sworn duty to try at least.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Our all-star panelists will discuss Biden's new executive order aimed at protecting transgender youth, and we'll discuss child vaccinations. But speaking of COVID, White House infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci has tested positive for the virus. According to the NIH, Fauci is only experiencing mild symptoms and is being treated with Paxlovid, adding that he will isolate and continue to work from home. They also said Fauci has not been in close contact with the president.
Some have pointed to the timing of Dr. Fauci's diagnosis. The twice-boosted doctor was set to testify in front of the Senate Health Committee today. Senator Rand Paul, who was previously sparred with Dr. Fauci, sits on that committee. Dr. Fauci will now be participating virtually, and of course, we wish him speedy recovery. He's very, very vaccinated, so he's just expected to have only mild disease. I can't help but think, though, look, he was very cautious, most probably mask-wearing public official there is. Still got it. Got it.
Robby, you're an intelligent person.
Okay. I don't like where this is going.
You know that the logic isn't that if you are safe, that means you absolutely will never get COVID.
Yeah, because
it
you will
get it. Lower the odds that you're going to get it or get it as regularly. And I was frankly surprised to learn that this was the first time that he's gotten it all of COVID. Most folks, especially folks who are, going into an office every day, I feel like have already succumbed.
Yeah, because everybody has or will get it. It's not I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to
who has not yet gotten COVID.
Well, your time will come, my friend. Your time will come. It's not avoidable. Look, it's not a moral failing.
It's not a moral failing, and I'm not morally superior for not having gotten it. I've said repeatedly that I think that there are things about my life that make it easier for me to avoid COVID. I don't live with anybody, yada, yada, yada. I haven't been going into an office until coming here to Rising.
Yeah. You sit next to me now, so you've upped your risk profile considerably.
I am aware. But all that being said, I don't know, there is something a little frustrating about the idea that, this is going to be used as proof positive that the kinds of safety measures that he's been recommending don't work to minimize your risk of getting COVID or make it so that you don't get it as frequently as some people have gotten it.
I totally take that point, but some people act as if it's the end of the world still, like the long COVID type people, and which, it can be a concern, but it's not. What can you do? You can't stop yourself from getting it.
What are the long COVID type people? Are you skeptical that long COVID is a disease or something that we should be concerned about?
I'm skeptical that it's as pervasive and serious as people claim, because people are very bad at self-diagnosis, and some of the studies so far have suggested people complaining about long COVID symptoms. Some of them hadn't even had it. Now, I'm not saying it's made up or it's in your head, certainly there are long-running complications you can have from a respiratory disease. Probably that's probably true of past diseases, or even the flu, regular things we've been dealing with for a long time. You can be enduringly ill and it be hard to explain. I mean, there's debates still about the reality of some disease, with this Lyme disease, or what Ross Douthat wrote about in his book. Well, it's right. People have different opinions about this. My point was not to call that into question, but you can't avoid COVID. You can reduce you maybe delay, and it was great we could really delay it until people were vaccinated because it wasn't as contagious, but now it's so contagious. The newer variants are more easily spread. When the wave comes through, everybody gets it except the absolute shut-ins.
I think all of that is true, which is, I think, a reason why people are not as able to rely on herd immunity as they once thought they would be, and why masking and other kinds of interventions that people want to take on their own volition make more sense now than they perhaps have even in the recent past.
I don't think masks make more sense now.
If herd immunity isn't as protective as it used to be, then I think that people are going to be less reliant on the idea that I'm probably not going to get it because I've gotten it recently. Because some of the studies that show that the newer variants just basically aren't as resistant to the antibodies people have built up in the past, it would make me, I remember when we first got boosted last summer, I really felt like vaccine boosted, it was free reign to go out into the world. Like, I really felt safe and protected in a way that is not really the case anymore. Now I feel like, well, if I get exposed to it, it's a high likelihood that I'm actually going to get it, as opposed to.
Well, because you haven't had it yet. I know you can get it again, but having had it does provide some protective immunity.
And we should do a segment on that.
Nobody knows exactly how much. Even the experts have different.
The recent studies show that getting COVID is now less protective than they thought with respect to the recent variants. But I don't want to get too many into the details of that because we don't have, that's not a segment we're doing right now. But the point of the matter is, people have the individual choice to do what they're going to do. I think masking makes more sense now that your natural immunity is not as protective as people once thought it was. But the real question I want to ask you is, how big of a risk of long COVID does there have to be for you to think that people are reasonable and wanting to protect themselves? Because I know that a lot of people had risks about the vaccines themselves, some of which are legitimate with the cardiological issues and things like that happens. But those are also in a very small percentage of the population, and frankly, a smaller risk than people who actually get COVID have those same kinds of long-term heart issues. So if that small risk is enough for people to have legitimate concerns about getting the vaccine, why is it that perhaps a similarly small risk of having long COVID isn't enough to make people want to be protective about the prophylactic things they can do to prevent?
Well, obviously, I think in both cases it should be your choice. You should do whatever is right for you. But you can choose to not get the vaccine. I'm saying you can't really choose to not get COVID. And people need to get out of the mindset that it is this that this is an avoidable thing. It's not avoidable. It's the fate of all people to eventually get it.
You can't just say that and make it true. It's not. It's literally not. And you're forcing me into a position where you're making it sound like I'm making an argument that it's completely possible and very highly likely that you'll never get it. But there is a huge difference between getting it 3 times a year, the way that some people have, and getting it once in the last 2 years, like Dr. Fauci has done.
Getting it 3 times in 1 year is not a common occurrence, as far as I can tell.
Are you kidding me? People have gotten it multiple times.
People say all sorts of things. People could have had it and not actually recovered from it because they have just once. And I've had other respiratory issues. I've taken tests 1,000 times. I would know if I'd had it more than once. I had it the one time, and that was back in July. And then in December, I was living with someone who had it when the Omicron came through. My wife, she had it. I didn't get it. It took no precautions to not get it in the same living experience as her, because I suspect I did have some protection from the previous infection. So look, it's different for every people. Some people are more prone to illness than others. I actually think I am a fairly prone to illness person. I've only had it the one time. And look, so different standards will make sense for different people. Vaccination is probably a good option. I think even for some young people, certainly who have pre-existing conditions or who are morbidly obese, from looking at the severe disease rates among young people, I absolutely think if it were my kid, I might give it to them depending on what their health circumstance is. So this is not everyone will have different what makes sense for them. So we're just talking about the level of government policy. But
we're not actually. We're talking about whether or not we can read into Dr. Fauci having gotten COVID an indictment of COVID.
I mean, if it was up to Dr. Fauci, we would have vaccine requirements for everyone on the planet, and we would have masking requirements for everyone on the planet.
That's not actually what we're talking about. We're talking about whether or not people can take whether Dr. Fauci getting COVID raises the implication that the preventative measures that Dr. Fauci has been recommending don't actually work.
The preventative measures that Dr. Fauci was recommending for 95% of the pandemic don't work that well, right? Remember, wear a mask, any mask was the message for a year and a half?
Yeah, and I agree that
now that is false.
Accurate.
That is no longer accurate information. So
I agree
for most of the pandemic, what they were saying is not accurate.
I agree with that, which is a real shame, because I do think that some skepticism about Dr. Fauci, the misinformation that's been coming out of the White House, has led people not to think that high quality masks, KN95 and higher masks, aren't effective, that the kinds of, some people are, it can also be transmitted through your eyes, some of the concerns about what happens
What is your level
airplanes.
of confidence that we won't later learn that guidance too is not accurate? I don't know, but this is every time. Like at first it was don't wear masks, they're pointless. Then it was no, wear a mask absolutely everywhere, any mask though. Just
yeah.
Now it's no, now that's all useless. Now you have to wear a really good mask. Are you absolutely confident that we won't later learn also that there's something wrong about that guidance?
Well, no, I do think that
I've
been a very vigilant, masker with high quality masks throughout, because I use my own judgment and always use high quality masks. And as we've discussed, it has worked for me so far, so that gives me a measure of confidence. But at bottom, the fact that the prophylactic measures are so not inconvenient, to me personally, I find the barrier to doing it so not that big a deal.
That's fine. And
that it doesn't, I don't need a huge demonstration of proof. If it later comes out that I was wearing these masks and it wasn't doing anything, oh well. Guess what? I haven't had a cold for 2 years either, so it's been pretty good. It was doing something for me.
Different people are different, but for me, it is a tremendous barrier to being able to interact with people and even like understand what people are saying. And I would rather get a cold 3 times a year than ever wear one again.
Right,
So
well, pick your poison, quite literally.
All right, well, stay tuned because we'll be back with more Rising right after this.